Ever wonder what the greatest transgressions were that doomed Gomorrah and Sodom? What lessons can we draw from these cities that perished due to their immorality? We will examine the hidden crimes of Sodom and Gomorrah today, learning valuable lessons about morality, divine justice, and the long-term effects of our decisions. In the time of Abraham, the events of Sodom and Gomorrah are described in the book of Genesis. Known for their riches and success, these two towns gained notoriety for their moral decay as well. A striking example of the severity of God's wrath on sin was demonstrated by the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. However, just what caused these towns to be destroyed? Although we frequently just consider sexual immorality, Sodom and Gomorrah committed many more serious and intricate crimes. And that howl that touched heaven was the beginning of it all. The outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great and their sins so grievous, the Lord said in Genesis 18:20. This quotation emphasizes the distinction between direct observation and knowledge. Even though God was omniscient and aware of these towns' immorality, the cry that reached him urged him to take immediate action. This tells us that our deeds are not in vain, and that sin may have such a powerful effect that it calls for a heavenly reaction. The people of Sodom and Gomorrah are in sharp contrast to Abraham, the patriarch renowned for his unshakable faith and extraordinary hospitality. Abraham led a life filled with love and optimism, in contrast to the cruelty and selfishness that characterized these towns. He prayed to God on behalf of Sodom and Gomorrah, asking that the towns be spared if there were even a small number of virtuous people living there. Abraham questioned the Lord in Genesis 18:23, asking, "Will you really sweep away the righteous with the wicked?" This was more than simply a request. It was a sincere plea from someone who recognized the value of kindness and justice. The people living in Sodom and Gomorrah were misled by their wealth. They were so focused on making themselves feel good that they failed to see the oncoming catastrophe. A string of self-centered decisions that resulted in moral decline characterized their lives. The affluence that the cities enjoyed eventually brought to hubris, conceit, and finally destruction. Lot, Abraham's nephew, welcomed the angels to Sodom and extended an invitation for them to spend the night at his home. But with evil purpose, the men of the city encircled Lot's home and had him bring his visitors outside so they might mistreat them. Genesis 19:4-5 tells us that all the males, young and old from all around the city of Sodom, approached the house before they had even gone to bed. "Where are the men who came to you tonight?" they yelled to Lot. "Bring them over to us so we may engage in sexual activity." This violent and disrespectful deed against Lot's visitors exposed Sodom's extreme moral decay. In ancient societies, showing hospitality was a holy virtue, and to show it otherwise was a serious transgression. In an attempt to shield his visitors, Lot exposed his own daughters to the throng in a desperate move that, although startling, shows the lengths he would go to in order to keep everyone within his home safe. But the angels stepped in and stopped the onslaught, blinding the men of Sodom. This heavenly intervention anticipated the impending judgment and brought attention to how serious the situation was. But Sodom and Gomorrah were not without other sins, including sexual immorality. From Ezekiel 16:49-50, we may see these cities' transgressions more broadly. "This, therefore, was the transgression of your sister Sodom. She and her daughters did not assist the destitute and impoverished. Instead, they were conceited, obliging, and overfed. They behaved abhorrently in front of me and were arrogant. I eliminated them as a result, as you can see." These passages highlight sexual immorality together with the existence of conceit, indifference, and disregard of the poor. The people who lived in Sodom and Gomorrah were so preoccupied with their own wants and requirements that they paid little attention to the needs of those who were most in need. The actual character of Sodom and Gomorrah was exposed by the angel's appearance in the city and the response of the populace. The city's tumultuous and impolite climate revealed a severe moral collapse. On the other hand, Lot's hospitality emphasized the depth of the city's moral bankruptcy and prepared the way for the subsequent divine retribution. Fire and brimstone ravaged Sodom and Gomorrah as Lot and his family escaped the city. The passage, "Then the Lord rained down burning sulfur on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of the heavens," appears in Genesis 19:24-25. As a result, he destroyed everyone residing in the city as well as the surrounding vegetation. overthrowing both the towns and the plain. This was more than simply a natural disaster. It represented divine retribution against excessive immorality. Many people use the tale of Sodom and Gomorrah to illustrate how moral decline may result in catastrophe. It is, however, also a tale of forgiveness and intercession. God heard the virtuous Abraham's prayer for these towns, and in his kindness, he spared Lot and his family. Lot's wife, on the other hand, was transformed into a pillar of salt, symbolizing the repercussions of holding on to sin in one's heart. She was filled with desire for the past. The destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah is another example of ultimate judgment mentioned in the New Testament. If he condemned the towns of Sodom and Gomorrah by having them burned to the ground and made them a symbol of what would happen to the wicked, as we read in 2 Peter 2:6-8, and if he saved Lot, a good guy who was troubled by the immoral behavior of the lawless, for the illegal activities he saw and heard plagued that righteous man's righteous conscience day after day while he lived among them. These allusions serve as a warning about what can occur when a group of people reject God. Many academics question Sodom and Gomorrah's historical existence for a long time. Recent archaeological data, however, suggests that they are close to the Dead Sea. According to the biblical time frame, these towns existed and were destroyed in a catastrophic way, as suggested by excavations at places like Babedra and Numera. A striking example of the effects of sin is the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. It serves as a reminder that sin can result in complete destruction if it is not checked, and that God takes justice seriously. But this tale also gives us cause for optimism. Lot and his family's redemption and Abraham's intervention demonstrate to us that God is kind and ready to redeem those who seek his righteousness. We are prompted to consider our own lives in the community in which we live by the tale of Sodom and Gomorrah. Do we ignore the underprivileged and destitute? Are we letting conceit and haughtiness dictate how we behave? Do we maintain emotional attachments to unseen transgressions? These are significant issues that we must take into account in our endeavor to live in accordance with God's principles. Jude 1:7 tells us that Sodom, Gomorrah, and the other towns succumbed to sexual immorality and depravity in a similar manner. They stand in for those who are condemned to an eternity of fire. This text reminds us of how seriously God takes sin and what happens if we disobey his warnings. The narrative of Sodom and Gomorrah serves as a wake-up call. To be sure we are living in accordance with God's principles, we must take an honest look at our own life. We must make an effort to emulate Abraham by standing up for others and pursuing justice. And we must steer clear of the errors made by the sinful and conceited people who lived in Sodom and Gomorrah. We should think about the value of compassion and hospitality in our lives as we explore this narrative. The genuine ideals of our society are reflected in the way we treat people, particularly the weakest members of society. Kindness may make a big impact in a society where people are frequently selfish and apathetic. May we strive to live lives that glorify God and learn from the mistakes made by Sodom and Gomorrah. May we, like Abraham, be intercessors, asking for others' forgiveness and justice. And may we never forget that what we do affects society as a whole, in addition to ourselves. I encourage you to share this video with others and subscribe to the channel if you found this information to be meaningful. Together, we can study biblical teachings more thoroughly and encourage more people to live moral lives. God bless and protect you.